Please be patient with me as I explain this entire situation to my family. I am 44 years old, have been married for 10 years, and have been with my wife, 41, for 13 years. We have an 8-year-old son, and we are happy with our lives, but this is not my first marriage. My family abandoned me after my wife's mysterious divorce, and 20 years later, they show up and claim credit for my success, but I laughed in their faces. I got married at the age of 22, but regrettably, that marriage ended in divorce within 3 years for reasons I don't yet know. My ex-wife Amy and I had been together since middle school and were essentially childhood sweethearts. After graduating from college and landing respectable jobs, we decided to get married. For the first few years, everything was great. But then, for some reason, things started to get strange. I did everything in my power to keep the spark alive between us, but after that, I began to feel like she was not interested at all. A few weeks before our 3rd wedding anniversary, she handed me divorcee papers and told me that she was done. I wanted to work on our marriage. I just wanted one explanation for why we had to end things after spending so much time together. However, she was unable to provide me with any explanation beyond the fact that she simply no longer loved me. I was devastated, but there was nothing I could do about it. So I chose to proceed because I had no other choice, and I didn't want to cause her further distress by making her stay with me and prolonging the divorce. We didn't have many joint assets, so it was a fairly simple process. And after that, I never saw her again. According to a few friends, she moved cities and cut off all communication after the divorce was finalized. This is common, but what was particularly odd was that even my family stopped talking to me at the time of the divorce. They ought to have been there for me during a really trying time, but instead, they began to distance themselves from me after when the divorce was finalized. I made a concerted effort to stay in contact with them, but I discovered that I had been blocked everywhere. I even attempted to visit them a few times, but neither my parents nor my sister ever opened the door for me. It was odd, and I was already going through a difficult period, so for a few years following the divorce, I couldn't even bring myself to do anything, and ended up, my family was never there for me after the divorce, so my friends took care of me. Eventually, I decided to start my own restaurant, which had always been my dream, but I had chosen to wait until I had saved up enough money. I'm extremely fortunate that even in such trying times, I had friends by my side who decided to motivate me to do better and try to move on. Since I also had to consider Amy during our marriage, I decided to go through with it alone. I also chose to use the name my parents had suggested for the restaurant, and with the assistance of my friends, I approached a few investors and won their support before developing a business plan and opening my first restaurant a few years later. It took me nearly 4 years to recover from the divorce, and 2 years later, I met my wife. We first spoke at a party when she told me she loved my restaurant, so after 3 years of dating, I decided to give love another chance and asked her to marry me. 10 years later, we are together with our son, and my personal life has improved over the past few years, but also my professional life because I have done fairly well in my career. It all began with a restaurant, but because of the success of the first one, we gradually started to grow. At the moment, I am the CEO of my own hospitality group, and we own a somewhat well-known chain of eateries and lodging facilities that we are currently planning to grow even more so that we are more well-known outside of the state. It has been a difficult journey, but I have worked hard to get to this point, so when I was asked to participate in an interview recently, I thought it was a sign that I had made it. I honestly didn't know that it would cause such a storm in my life, as my family decided to get in touch with me after watching that interview on the news. The channel that aired it was a massive, moderately popular one, so I didn't really expect my family to watch it, and even if they had, I wouldn't have expected them to show up at my office. Since my workplace isn't particularly private, it must have been easy for them to find me. But even so, it was still inappropriate for them to show up and insist on seeing me during business hours, and that's exactly what they did 3 days ago. And it was strange for me to see them after all this time. When they arrived, I was working, but the receptionist informed me that my family was waiting outside. At first, I assumed she was referring to my wife and son, which would have been strange because my wife was at work and my son was in school, but she clarified that it was actually my parents and sister who were there to greet me. At that point, I told the receptionist that I would see them later, but that they would have to be told to leave for the time being, because I was having trouble processing what was happening. However, they refused to leave and began to act out. So I had to step in to stop security from ejecting them from the building before I could talk to them and find out what the hell was going on. I went to see them in the lobby, And as soon as they immediately began praising me and telling me how wonderful it was that I had achieved enough success to make the news and how inspirational my story was. It felt strange to hear them say that because they were my family and should have been included in the story I kept trying to tell. They started acting as though nothing had changed since I had last seen them, which was nearly 20 years ago. They began talking about how they had seen my family as well, after I dismissed it by telling them that I had to return to work. I mentioned in my interview how wonderful my wife and son had been to me during my journey, and the channel had assembled a few pictures of our family. So I assume that's what they were referring to when they said they truly wanted to meet my wife and their grandson as soon as possible, because they had been away from us all for a long time. They began telling me that I should have tried harder to contact them after the divorce, and that I hadn't done enough. At that point, I realized that I might finally be able to learn what had gone wrong, so I chose to let them speak rather than telling them to leave. He even sat down with them in the lobby to discuss what had transpired years ago in order to gain some closure. As they were speaking, I learned the true reason Amy had chosen to file for divorce from me and the specific reason my family had left me. You guys may have figured it out by now, but yes, Amy had been cheating on me, and I had no idea because my don't judge them too quickly though, because they had good reason to help her hide it all along. According to them, they had good reason to help their daughter-in-law cheat on their son. It turns out that Amy was having an affair with my cousin, my dad's older brother's son. When they finally told me about it, everything seemed to make sense almost instantly. I had always detested my cousin Carl, a spoiled, entitled brat. But sadly, his mother died when he was only 6 months old, so his father and the rest of the family seemed to believe that he should get away with everything he did. This is why I hadn't been invited to any family events in the previous 20 years, and why I had been completely rejected for no fault of my own. It didn't help that my uncle was my dad's boss because he had started the family business, and my dad had joined him later. After our marriage, Carl had decided he wanted to be with Amy, and she had wanted the same thing. So my family had no choice but to support them because they couldn't risk my uncle getting upset. However, they told me that after the divorce, my uncle made it very clear that he didn't want anyone from the family, including my parents and sister, to have any contact with me at all. Apparently, they had tried to object, but then Amy announced that she was pregnant with my child and asked if they ever wanted to have any contact with they would have to cut me off. Grandkid. By the way, I didn't know that Amy was pregnant when she filed for divorce, and she hadn't been showing either, so I couldn't have guessed. She hadn't been living with me either, as she had moved out long before the divorce was finalized, so I didn't know that I'd become a father long before my son was born. And it turns out that I have a daughter who's, in any case, this is what my parents told me about what actually happened all those years ago. I was barely able to process it at the time because I felt like I was being told a story, and I had to pinch myself to realize that this was my reality. My family had essentially just cut me off in favor of having a child. She is almost 20 years old, but she has never even met me and believes Carl is her biological father, relationship with their grandchild and job security, or so they thought. But in my view, they cut me off because they were cowards and had the option to confront me with the truth and let me handle the matter. Instead, they chose to be terrified of my dad's brother, acting as though he could do them any harm other than dismissing my father from the company. And even then, my dad could have easily retaliated by filing a lawsuit because I literally can't. Think of any justification for them not telling me about Amy's pregnancy, or the fact that I have a daughter. They had been silent about this for 20 years, until they realized that I was doing well in life, and then they suddenly felt very sorry for everything and wanted to make amends. Unfortunately for them, I was able to see through their act, and as soon as when they were finished telling me everything, I told them that I needed them to leave because, despite what they had just said, I didn't have the capacity to forgive them at the time. I tried to be polite to them because, after all, we were sitting in the lobby of my place of employment, and I didn't want to lose my cool. Of course, I couldn't rely on them to act in the same manner, so when I told them that I wanted them to leave, they immediately began complaining about it and telling me that I should consider their perspective and how tough things had been for them as well. I informed them that I was positive they had chosen to contact me now only because I was successful and they wanted a piece of that, but they began to deny it strongly, and my sister even went so far as to say that I owed my success to them since neither of them had offered any support over the years, and I had done everything on my own with the assistance of friends. I thought it was really bold of her to make such a claim. First of all, she clearly meant that I had used the name that they had suggested for my restaurant all those years ago, when it was still a dream of mine. However, their suggestion of a name did not make them. They immediately began arguing with me, telling me that they would not be leaving until we had resolved our differences. But to be honest, I was not interested, so I did exactly what I had said. It was such a ridiculous idea that I ended up laughing at her and telling her that if she and her parents did not leave that very instant, I would have them thrown out of the building. Security threw them out of the building after I told them I would do so. They were understandably upset and kept trying to explain that they had no choice in the matter. But I don't believe that they had a choice. They simply made the wrong decision, and now they will have to deal with the consequences. It hasn't been difficult for them to live for the past 20 years without seeing me and It's been 3 days since then, and they haven't stopped trying to get in touch with me. They have been sending me emails at my work address, texting me on social media, and even showing up at my office without having the courage to go back inside yet. Their attitude has definitely changed, as they are now only attempting to apologize to me. Family. I'm sure they can handle it in the future as well. I've talked to my wife about this because no matter what I do for my family, we still have to. Think about my daughter, who I didn't see. Their messages are just full of excuses, and even when I see them standing outside my workplace, they look really upset and wait for me to stop for them. I just drive by and ignore them. It's gotten to the point where I almost feel bad for them. Even knew existed until a few days ago. We have been circling back and forth on that, because neither of us is sure if we should try to contact her or not. And we also have a family to take care of, because I don't think they're going to go anywhere until they have another opportunity to talk to me. My wife believes that, just to try to sort things out, since this is bad for my mental health, I should just talk to them, invite them home, and let's all work things out so that at least we can get rid of the toxicity. However, I personally don't want to do anything like that. I just want to ignore them until they go away on their own, primarily because I don't have the capacity to deal with them right now, especially after everything that I discovered. And whatever it has been a week and 3 days since I posted here. And my wife and I have decided that we're going to continue to ignore my family. Fortunately, they haven't contacted me in the last few days. Now, we're having a lot of trouble figuring out what to do and how to deal with this. And I want to ask AITA for not wanting to give them a chance to speak to me after 20 years of no contact. Update 1. They haven't been showing up at my workplace. Most likely because they've grown weary of it, or perhaps because the security has intimidated them. Regardless, I'm glad they stopped because it was much easier for me to stop thinking about them. I suppose it was just their faces that made me feel bad about whatever I was doing, but I no longer feel bad about ignoring their messages. They can continue to apologize all they want, but it won't make a difference, because the truth is that they have let me down as a family, and no amount of apology will ever make that right. They have also continued to send me messages from different accounts and email addresses, and I'm not even bothering to block them anymore, because they're just going to make new ones. One of them tried to apologize to me, but I'm going to ignore it all anyway. Let's see how long they can continue this, and how sorry they are for everything. Now, let's move on to the other issue we were having with my wife and me. We had no idea how to handle the situation with my daughter, though we do have a name because my parents told me her full name and the college she attends. We've been able to track her down, and my assistant was able to locate her social media account for me. However, I haven't done anything yet. I'm not even sure if it's appropriate for me to do anything, and I don't know how I'm supposed to inform her that I am her biological father. Since she isn't a minor, I can't just show up at Amy's house and demand custody and other things. And to be honest, I would much rather not involve her in this at all, because after learning about her, I no longer respect her and my entire family. They are all cowards without courage, and I don't want anything to do with them. However, I can't say the same thing for my daughter because, regardless of who raised her, she is still my biological daughter. If anyone has any suggestions on how to approach her about this, or please let me know if I should even be doing that. I also want to thank everyone who commented on my first post. It was really helpful. I hope you can help me again. Here is update 2. After reading the comments on my update from 3 days ago, my wife and I decided to follow through because there was no use in waiting for the ideal moment or chance to text since our daughter lives in a different state and we don't think it would be appropriate to fly out to see her. We decided to send her a message first and see how that goes. We reached out to her on Instagram and explained everything as politely as we could, and we are currently waiting for a response from her. I'm sure it will be quite difficult to deal with. Accepting it is difficult for me too, and I'm not even sure how my wife has been able to be so understanding when I'm attempting to reconnect with my long-lost daughter from my previous marriage. I'm sure it's a lot of difficult feelings for everyone, but we're doing our best, and I sincerely hope that my daughter will get in touch with me again, because I would really love to have a relationship with her in the future. To my parents and their activities. They haven't visited my place of employment in a very long time, and yesterday they sent me a lengthy email in which they expressed their sincere regret for everything, but they also stated that they sincerely wanted to mend their relationship with me, and that they only needed one chance from me. They also informed me that they wouldn't be contacting me again, and that they would instead wait for me to contact them. They took the hint and realized that I really don't want to talk to them right now. I already have a lot on my plate, so the last thing I need is for them to cause more drama. I'm hoping they follow through on their promise and don't get in touch with me again. If I feel ready or want to talk to them at any time, I'll do it myself. But for now, it seems like it's highly unlikely that it will happen anytime soon, because now that I know the true reason they haven't spoken to me in 20 years, things have gotten much worse between us. I feel betrayed and hurt, and I don't think that will go away anytime soon. At least this experience has given me information about my daughter, and I now sincerely hope that she will decide to give our relationship a chance. If all goes well, he might find a sister in her, and I might be able to get to know the daughter. I never knew I had. I just have a lot of emotions right now, and I'm really trying hard to keep it together. Update 3. I reached out to my daughter on social media almost 2 weeks ago, and I sent her a message. I haven't told my son about this yet, just in case she doesn't want to talk to us, so I wouldn't want to give him false hope. I sent her a message explaining everything about who I was and how she was related to me. I waited for her to reply for 2 weeks, and today I received a text back. She didn't say much, just that she had discussed me with her mother following my message, and had finally discovered that I was her biological father. Clearly, this had come as a shock to her, because she had thought for the previous 20 years that Carl wasn't aware that she wasn't her biological father's daughter. She also learned the truth about how her mother and I got to be this way, and she told me that she wanted to meet me and my family. We are all flying out to see her this weekend, because she isn't talking to her family at the moment, and doesn't have the money to come see us. She didn't go into specifics, but when she confronted Amy about Amy initially attempted to deny the message she had received, but she was compelled to tell her the truth. I haven't heard from Amy yet, and I sincerely hope she doesn't get in touch with me, because I don't want to talk to her, but my family immediately broke their word and began attempting to speak with me after learning that I had contacted my daughter. Apparently, my uncle was incensed that I had learned about it, which was understandable given that they had worked for 20 years to ensure I never found out, so I wouldn't cause them any problems. However, now that I did, my uncle was holding my parents accountable for everything. My dad no longer works for him. He now runs his own independent business, but for some reason, he still fears his older brother, and he has been pleading with me to tell him or Carl about it, or someone that they had nothing to do with this, and that I somehow discovered on my own. But even if I did, I doubt anyone would believe it, because they are the only ones who are likely to do such a thing, because I haven't been close to most of my family in the last 20 years, and they haven't bothered to talk to me. It's funny how desperate they are acting right now, just so that update 4. Hello everyone. Today, my family and I finally met my daughter. It was strange at first, then it was really emotional, but honestly, it was just beautiful. They don't lose the relationship they have with my uncle, but I don't really care, because it was because of them that I didn't have a relationship with my daughter for 20 years of our lives. She seems to be a really nice and kind person, which is strange because she was raised by 2 of the worst and most crestfallen people I've ever met. However, I suppose they did a good job raising her. Or perhaps it's just in her nature, but she seems to be a really mature and intelligent girl. We talked for a long time about how things were going with Amy and her father, and she told me that they weren't on board by nature. When she met us, she didn't care because, once she learned the truth, she didn't care what her parents thought. Since she is their only child, they didn't have any children after her, so she doesn't think she will leave them forever, but she will definitely put some distance between them for a while, and try to process everything. She told me that she needs some time to start building a relationship with me as well. And I completely understand that she's in a really strange place mentally right now. But overall, we had a great time, and she seemed to get along with both my wife, and her half-brother. We also had dinner together, and we discovered that my parents' grandparents had been in contact with her all along, and she always thought it was strange how sentimental they were about her, given that they were her grandfather's brother's family, not her biological grandparents, but now it all makes sense why they were so attached to her. Nevertheless, after learning everything, she and I both view them differently, so I can fully understand how she feels. Perhaps not entirely, as I'm much older than her and she's only 20. She's likely finding it much harder to cope with because she has. All I'm really happy about is that the meeting went well, and my family seems to be really content after all of this, so I'm quite content with the situation as well. She has been deceived her entire life by the people she believes to be the closest to her, but in any case, we will both need to work on this, and hopefully the future will be better. I know it must be because we're going to try to make it the best. What counts is that, at least now, after all these years, we have an opportunity to put things right, and I'm going to take advantage of it, regardless of what my family, Amy, or Carl have done.